Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Public Works and Finance Committee meeting for Monday, July 27th of 2020. To my left is Councilwoman Sandra Kelly, and to my right is Councilwoman Brandy Sullivan. I am Gina Terusio. Our regular agenda starts with the approval of the July 13th, 2020 minutes.
I move that we accept the minutes.
They look good to me too.
Okay, awesome. They are approved. Our second item is a lot line adjustment at 204 First Street and 108 North Washington Street. Amy Henrik, are you here with us today?
Maybe she's in Zoom land.
I think she's in Zoom.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I apologize for not being able to, you'll be able to see my face. I don't have a camera on my computer, but I believe that that's going to change in the future. So we'll just get right into this presentation. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Let's try that again.
There we go.
All right. So today we have a lot line adjustment for 204 East First Street and 108 North Washington Street. The subject properties are located just south of Washington and north of First Street. As you can see, 108 North Washington is 4,000 square feet and has 56 feet of street frontage. 204 East First Street is 3,500 square feet with 62.5 feet of street frontage. A recent survey was conducted and showed that the existing garage at 204 East First Street overhangs the common property line by 1.3 feet. The applicant is proposing that the common property line shift to the north by 1.3 feet. You can see the new proposed lot line here as well as the current. As a result, 108 North Washington would be 3,418.75 square feet and still have 54.7 feet of frontage. 204 East First Street would have 4,081.25 square feet and 62.5 feet of street frontage. Both properties are currently zoned R4, multiple family residential. In R4, lot sizes are required, the lot minimum is 5,000 square feet, and the lot frontage is required to be 50 feet. Both of these lots are currently legally non-conforming and will remain as such. However, the garage will no longer encroach upon the common property line. So it is for that reason that staff recommends the approval of the lot line adjustment with no conditions. Do you have any questions?
Brandy, Sandra, questions by any chance?
No, I think it would be nice for that garage to be on one lot.
I agree. Okay, then it looks like we will recommend approval of the lot line adjustment request with no conditions, and that's consent.
Yeah, I think
Thank
so.
you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Amy. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Okay, our next item is parking permit fee review. Mr. Reedner.
Thank you. At our budget workshop meeting last Tuesday, the 21st, a discussion came up regarding a potential revision to the parking permit revenues that were called out in the budget document and on the proposed fee resolution. As you'll recall, about a year ago in the FY 2020 budget, there was $40,000 that was put in that budget to do a study, comprehensive study of downtown parking to supplement some of the information, the voluminous information that you have in your packets. With the COVID-19 situation, the decision was made by council to not proceed with that study. There were some discussions last summer about were there any steps prior to or that would obviate the need of having a comprehensive study, and those discussions revolved around changes in some of the different timed parking designated areas, or number two, changing the price of parking permits. It was deemed to hold off on that until after the comprehensive parking study was completed. Since that time, since there was no budget for this year, meaning FY 2021 for a comprehensive parking study, the discussion came up whether maybe some movement should be, or adjustment should be made to the current parking permit fees of $85 per annum in the downtown area. Before we get to that, like I said, we put all kinds of background data in your packets, starting with the original study that was done back in 2008 at the behest of the Transportation Commission. At that time, the price of parking was $375 a year for a green parking permit. Then there was a yellow parking permit that cost $230, I believe, and then various monthly and daily charges beyond that. So that study was fairly comprehensive, did a mass of counts at different times in the four main city parking lots, which would be the North Jackson lot, the South Jackson lot, City Hall parking lot, and the Jefferson lot, which is across the street from City Hall, across Jefferson Street. There were some complications, as you know, with the Jefferson Street lot, because the Jefferson Street lot is also counted toward the 1912 Center conditional use permit for use as a community center. And that was pointed out back in 2008, 2009. At any rate, if you could follow the convoluted minutes through all of the committee meetings culminating in the final council meeting, there were about 4 motions put forth at that meeting. The only motion that really was accepted, there was talk about changing different parking times and such like that. Those motions were defeated fairly universally. The motion that was approved was taking the parking permit fee from $375 to $75. At that time, one of the justifications was to keep the fees fairly close to those charged by the University of Idaho, because we did not want to have students parking downtown, because it's not that long of a walk up to the University of Idaho campus. I would note at the time that that study was conducted, the University of Idaho still had quite a bit of capacity in their Sweet Avenue parking lot, which, if you're familiar with that lot now, the last 3 years, it has been full to the brim almost every day school is in. So that is an issue as well. So again, about all that was done was to take the 2 classes of parking permits, the yellow permit and the green permit, make 1 class of permits, make that class of permits $75 per year, and that, I believe at that time, 130 permits were authorized. Since that time, the parking permit fee has gone from $75 to $85 per year, and the number of permits, and I incorrectly in the CCSR said there are 155 permits that are authorized. It's actually 152 permits. Of those 152 permits, as of Friday, 149 of them were held by individuals, and the other 3 were being processed, so for renewal. So there are 81, I guess, waiting list people who would like to have a parking permit, but we just don't have that capacity. If you go back through the public testimony in 2008 and 2009, all of the arguments for or against increased parking cost, more parking areas, so on and so forth, were brought out at that time. The usual, is it perception, is it reality? And different business owners said that, you know what, it doesn't bother my business, or excuse me, the business owners, I think statistically or percentage-wise, thought it was a bigger issue than a survey done of the consumers, who indicated they would walk farther than businesses thought they would walk. Of course, that's tempered somewhat by the time of year. If you're walking across snow berms in the middle of Washington Street or Jackson Street, then probably closer to the business is where you want to be. The issue of having employees park in those downtown timed parking slots, that was also brought up. So again, you can read those for yourself. As I indicated, prior to the comprehensive parking study funding that was put in the FY 2020 budget, the two things that were brought up as potentials last spring were differences in parking times. You'll recall back in 2008, by reading that study, there was a proposal to take different diagonal parking in downtown and make it 90 minutes instead of the 3-hour zone. And there was one other change that was also made in 2009, and that was to take certain side streets and allow overnight parking. And that was in order that if someone over imbibed in downtown, they didn't feel obligated to move their cars so they wouldn't get a ticket. The other discussion was adjusting those parking fees. And as you can see from 2009, they've only been adjusted once, and I can't recall exactly when that was, going from $75 to $85. I would note that I just talked to Tyler Palmer today, and last spring, one of the reasons that we started discussing parking was that the U of I was talking about increasing their parking fee rates as well. You recall that was quite a big discussion. The cost of parking was going to go up significantly, and we were prepared to react to that because we, again, didn't want those students who are migrating off campus because of the higher permit fees to then take up downtown parking as they're parking to go to school. The U of I decided that they were not going to do that. There was quite a lot of feedback on campus, and they elected to keep, although they made some changes in configuration of lots. As far as I know, they did not adjust the cost of parking significantly. So that kind of took the heat off, and I think kind of allowed some time to do an additional study. So with that, that's background. I will note that Bill Belknap actually has been way more involved in this than I have. Les McDonald and Bill Belknap were the liaisons. Bill remains the liaison to Transportation Commission that, as you can see from the materials, the original parking study in '08 emanated from the Transportation Commission. So Bill will be back in time for the next committee meeting in August. So I would recommend that if you have direction, want to discuss this today, certainly able to do that, but I would hesitate to move forward too quickly without at least getting some of Bill's historical knowledge. I think perhaps one of the reasons, and Brandy, you can certainly speak to this if you like, one of the reasons to bring it up at this meeting was because the council will be considering the 2021 fee resolution on August 3rd as well. It really is not that huge of an issue to adjust individual fees afterwards. If they're going to increase more than 5%, which I'm assuming that if these were, then it would be more than 5%. You do have to advertise to have a public hearing on any fee that's going to increase more than 5% or a new fee altogether. So again, it's a little less convenient, but certainly not insurmountable. But I would encourage the council to get as much information as possible before changing these fees. I'd hate to have all that comprehensive work that was done at least not considered as we move forward. So with that, I'd entertain any questions that you have, and happy to answer anything. I know Chief Fry's here as well, virtually, so he can certainly talk to you. The police department has been mainly in charge of permits and parking, so he's ready to answer any questions you might have as well.
Sandra or Brandy, do you have any questions?
I do have a couple, and it's fine if it waits for Bill. I mean, I did look through a lot of that material, but do we know the current breakdown with the green permits of how many of those maybe there's no mechanism to know it, but how many of those are going to residents that live downtown versus employees of downtown versus just the general public? Or can we obtain that information?
Chief
I
Ryan?
can answer that.
Yay.
I believe we can go through those and break them down to business owners and then resident individuals. And I can have that ready for you probably by the end of the week.
That would be great. I think that would be really useful information in really deciding what should happen with that price, so thank you. And then, what is the current range of U of I permit prices? Do we know that? Okay. Thank you, Art. Okay, so. Okay, I'll just give a little recap here. The only one that's valid for overnight parking, so all the time, is the gold. That's the most expensive, $366 a year. And then there are other tiers of $270, $179, and $77. The cheapest at $77 is just particular lots and no overnight parking in any of the other tiers. So,
Okay.
thank you, Art. Okay. I do have one other question,
go ahead.
probably for Chief Fry. What is the enforcement like with the permits?
Our parking has normal routes that they go on, and they go through those lots to check to make sure that a permit is in a vehicle. If it's not, the individual will be cited for parking in a permit area. The parking people, as they do their routes, they go out for 3 hours in the morning, and then they go back out again later to check on those.
And with a green permit, you could leave your car in the same spot, say in the Jackson lot, for months without moving it, right? I mean, there's no requirement for it to be moved at all. It could be just stored there.
Yeah, there's no requirement that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Is that all?
That's it for
Okay.
questions. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that I have questions, just because, the whole new packet, which I appreciate a lot, I skimmed it during my 13-minute lunch, so I didn't gain any new information than what I had before, but I certainly have some thoughts about parking. I don't know if this is a time to think about that or at another date.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's enough interest, probably among many of us, that we want to pursue
Yeah.
having a discussion.
Well, I personally, there are a couple things that roll through my head while I'm thinking about this, and I remain unchanged, especially now. Thank you, Art, for the information from the university. I remain unconvinced that this isn't a perception problem. And I really do believe that if we're going to do any big changes, substantive changes, we're going to need that study first. I also completely believe that this could be, I don't know if there's any other situation that could be worse than this one, to choose to raise prices on parking in our downtown that's already struggling with COVID and all of the effects therein. Now, do I want to continue and bring Mr. Belknap and his historical information into this discussion? Yes, but it is an uphill battle from there for me.
So I would say, I think the permits for me are a little bit different than just a consideration of charging for public parking, which that's not part of this conversation. We just have, that's free and will continue to be free. But with the permits, I think a big change that happened that no one could foresee 12 years ago when they decreased it by that much, at the time where they made that change, there were all these unsold permits. Because at that time, clearly the price was too high, the demand wasn't great enough for paying that much. Since then, the price went down so much, now there's a waiting list of 81 people. And the value of those, if you break it down per day, I don't know why not everybody is on that waiting list. I mean, it just, in my estimation, it doesn't really have any value, but yet you can take up all these spaces in the central business district constantly taking them away from customers. And so and having talked with some other business owners who have some for themselves and their employees, they're like, oh yeah, it would be worth a lot more than that to me. But it's a no-brainer. I'm going to try to get as many as I can, just because they're so inexpensive. So I think, I agree that getting more of the background summary from Bill, but I do see that the parking permit issue itself, to me, is a little different than the broader and even independent of perceptions, or is there a problem or isn't there a problem? To me, it stands alone that these are undervalued. And it's been a long time that price hasn't changed other than $10.
I will hear you and respectfully disagree, like we
That's
always
okay.
do.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's the consensus of this group today, Mr. Reedner, that we do get more information from Mr. Belknap when he comes back, and further the discussion at that point.
Okay, we will bring it back. Is there direction to bring it back at the next meeting, or
Next
because?
committee meeting,
Okay,
yeah.
sounds good, thank you.
Yes, okay,
Will
thank
that
you.
include, because I'm also concerned about people parking their vehicles there for an entire semester or
Right, I
an
mean,
entire
state-
year.
Discussion.
So will that,
Could
I would
leave
really
for
like
them.
to see something, I don't know exactly, but can we put, you have to move your vehicle at some point, even if it's to another spot on the lot. Keeping your camper there for a year bothers me a lot. And I don't want to get it to be a storage area. I don't know what the wording is on that,
Long-term
but
parking.
I would like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know
But
if
I would
that's it
like
or
to
not.
see, I don't know what he can find on that, but I would like to see us be able to progress toward past the long-term $75 permit at that spot if you're just leaving your car there forever, so.
In the public right-of-way, you have to move your vehicle every 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, but people aren't purchasing to park on the public right-of-way. So, yeah, that'd be a little tough to enforce. I understand you don't want a vehicle that sits there,
Right.
gets put up on blocks for a year, but
Indeed.
people are purchasing a parking space. They expect that they aren't going to have to go move their car every 48 hours in order to maintain that.
Sure, but maybe we increase the price if that's what the intent
Sure, we
is,
can
so.
talk
Right,
about
I'd like to see something along
That's what I think
that.
too, like if at that price, that's the cheapest parking garage you can have. So if it were more expensive, then it may be worth it for you to find someplace else to leave it for months when you leave, It may not be, and it is really more geared to those people that really need it because either they live downtown or they work downtown or own a business downtown. Freeing up other spots to be available. Maybe asking Bill just for his sort of overview of some suggestions that he might have from his familiarity with this whole process and seeing what has happened since that change was made in 12 years.
I do want to get some understanding and information from Bill, but I really hesitate to ask him for recommendations because that's our job. So I don't want to put him in that position.
Yeah, I
He
don't-
can give us
Yeah.
information to help us choose one way or the other, but I don't want to put him in that position.
If you recall, the recommendations that were brought forward in '08 were the recommendations of the Transportation Commission, not of staff, so.
Right.
Yeah, and one of the other things then, there was so much discussion about changing the timing on some of the parking that ultimately went around and around and none of those changes were made. So that reduction in the parking fee was the only real substantive change that was made. And with now the continuation of 3 hours free everywhere and even less expensive, I think that that's just sort of exacerbated the whole. It's just continued to even further undervalue parking and disincentivize people to take alternatives or to park a couple blocks away. Because we know there are plenty that can't, but there's not any much incentive built in right now for those that can to do so.
Okay. You good?
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
awesome, yes. I appreciate the conversation too, ladies, councilwomen, whatever I'm supposed to call you. The next item on our agenda is a resolution pre-authorizing the acceptance of an airport aid grant from the United States Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Program. Good Lord, who made that title? Tony Bean, are you with us electronically?
I am.
You made this title up, didn't you?
No.
That would be me.
All
No.
of the long words possible.
Thank you to the federal government.
So what do you have for us today, sir?
So the request is to maximize the ability of the sponsors to take advantage of an opportunity if the FAA has carryover funds that are left at the end of this fiscal year. So the federal fiscal year ends end of September. And it was recommended to staff that we encourage the sponsors to put in an application. That way, if money does become available, the FAA is not searching for projects. They already know that we have a project that has match available due to the CARES Fund capability to put funding that gets us further down the road of getting a terminal constructed. And if you were in line and with your hand up, it's a lot easier to receive funding than missing the opportunity.
Tony, we've taken advantage of this before, correct?
We've done this, I don't know, Gary, a couple or three different times where funds have shown up at the end of the year. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But my opinion, it's always best to be prepared because we're going to request that funding. We want the maximum discretionary amount, which is $20 million that the FAA can provide towards a terminal building. And right now we're at 15 in our capital improvement program through next year and the year after. But if they can get us the other 5 this year to get us to 20, that's definitely in the best interest of the sponsors.
Do you guys have any questions for Tony? How do you feel about it?
I always think it's good to be prepared. I don't see any negative to doing this.
Yeah, I think I'm
Okay,
always happy to get the grants. Be
sounds
ready for
like
'em.
we recommend the adoption of that resolution, sir, and I guess that would go to full council, or does
Can go
can
to
it go on
consent.
consent? Okay, awesome, let's put it on consent. Tony, thank you for taking good care of our airport, appreciate it.
We're working at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, that's the end of our regular agenda. Shall we adjourn?
Can I back up to just one more comment about parking? Just while we're
Can we
here
do that?
together?
Do what?
She would like to make another comment about parking?
Sure.
Sure.
It's up to
So-
the chair.
Yeah, I was just thinking about with the change with the parking study, because when we were considering that, I know there was some thought that, why don't we make a couple changes and then not fund the parking study and see, maybe they will solve the problem. And I was one of those who was really all for the parking study, I'll say that right now, I don't think you need any reminding. But now that we're not doing that, I feel like it's the perfect time to then go to that alternative of, well, let's implement a couple things during this time that we don't have any plan to spend money on another parking study, and then maybe the problem will go away. And we will not be revisiting spending money in a parking study in another couple years. I don't know.
Well, I'm not trading
Yeah.
the parking study
Yeah.
for changes now, but I do still really feel that any kind of an increase at this point is not, timing is not the right moment. Are we going to discuss it? Yes,
Yeah.
but this is COVID-19 time. And I think that that's difficult if we were to even remotely think about
Mm-hmm.
putting it back up to even $1 a day. That's a remarkable increase for businesses and citizens who are strapped right now.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So I'm going to be hard to convince.
So the one other thing I wanted to ask about, and this is probably a question for Gary in this conversation, what if we want to look at the time, changing some times from the 3-hour parking? Because that was another thing that was recommended, wasn't implemented, that we've talked about, that there's been some support for recently. Can we also have Bill provide us some information on that, even though this
Well,
is not a
I think the
fee
only
issue? but-
information you're going to find is what's in the '08 study. But
Okay.
that doesn't mean, the world's your oyster at this
Yeah.
point. You could do a survey downtown. We could ask Bill whether his department has the capability of doing a survey to determine what people's wants are in the downtown area. Things have changed over the last 12
Yeah.
years. So you can do just about whatever you want, and you can also, again, if we're not going to make any fee changes in the FY 2021 fee resolution, anytime it can come forward.
Okay.
So if you want to take 3 months, 6 months, do a survey, think about it, maybe kick it back to Transportation Commission, you can do anything like that and then bring it forward comprehensively.
Similar to, if I read that correctly, back in the '08 study, it was the Transportation Commission and the Chamber that did the survey?
Yes, I believe Transportation Commission did it with the assistance of some interns or students. So, yeah, you can do it any way you want.
I think they kind of formed their own committee that was made up of some downtown business owners and maybe a representative from the chamber, but it was like its own study group that had some members from the Transportation Commission on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you say a survey, in my mind, there are a lot of different surveys. I know that you can look at parking lots to see who's parking. I'm mainly interested, I guess, in what Gene is talking about worried about price increases for this hard year. I want to know what the business people think about this, because if they're like, we don't mind if it goes up a little bit, then great. Those are the people I'm worried about hurting more than anyone.
Yeah.
Or what do our business owners think? So that kind of survey I like. Watching how many people park where, I think we've done that over and over. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not as
Right.
interested in that. But I do want to know what that swath of businesses downtown think.
See,
yeah.
I would even add the whole of the business community. Because being a business on the outlying Moscow edges right now, downtown or parking in general affects us as well. So I would ask if we do that sort of thing, that we'd include all of Moscow businesses. And yeah, we're gonna end up
Yeah.
expanding things, but I
Yeah.
do think that we need more than just the downtown.
And I agree too that I don't think it makes sense to spend a whole lot of time and effort on doing counts again. Because, the others are very old, so I don't think they're relevant now, but things are not normal now, so it's also not relevant now. And who knows what's gonna happen in the next few months. So the counts themselves, I think, but what are people's support of or not support of the two things, the parking permit changes, which I do think also with what you're both saying, very true, the financial issues right now are not good. So I think also considering residents, because how many of those, and
Right.
Chief Fryer will get that to us, are residents who live down there that a change in that can be a significant
Sure,
burden right now.
absolutely.
Not just the business owners, but then also asking those businesses and everywhere and customers how they feel about one side being 2-hour parking or 90-minute parking. Because that has shifted perhaps to where there may be some more support of that to discourage employees from parking on the key spots, keep those open for customers, have more turnover. We've talked a little bit about even having a few intermittent, like brief pickup spots on a more permanent basis after experiencing how much that helps some of these businesses to have those people that they just need to drive up, grab something and leave. And now that there's a few spots like that. So those say loading zone type of spots. So I think surveys geared at how do citizens and businesses throughout the city feel about those kinds of adjustments that have nothing to do with the price change.
Well, and I would even say, let us be careful designing a survey. We might find from the other 3 counselors, 3 other things we want to throw into the survey. So it'll be an interesting conversation in a 2 weeks when we hear from Bill.
Yeah, I would note that before you dismiss counts serve several purposes. Number one is a shortage of parking merely a perception. If you've got a third of the spaces open up 100% of the time, chances are it is perception. When this study was done back in '08, part of the reason it was implemented and the prices were lowered was to get people off of Main Street parking in the Jackson Street lot so that it would open up more of that traffic circulation. So its availability, it was also used, I believe, to raise or set the number of parking permits that would be allowed. The more parking permits, the cheaper they are, the more your spaces are going to be filled in, less circulation, forcing people into public rights of way. So it's an art to it, but it is something that before you dismiss surveys, again, I'd be very interested to see what Bill's perception is from when these were done originally.
Do you know if there was enough information obtained early on when we were able to do the overhead photography? If Bill got enough?
I honestly don't.
Because that was very recent.
Yeah, I was not involved in that,
Okay.
but
Write that
I
one
know
down.
he intended
'cause
to do more
Yeah.
and then was not able to, but I
Yeah.
wonder how much he
Yeah.
got, that he already has, could be useful.
That would be a good
Yeah.
question.
So
Yeah.
the one other thing, and I don't know if this is opening a can of worms, but since we seem to have our can openers, I'll ask it anyway. Just in case we have another summer of COVID next summer, I don't know if it's possible to get any information from surveys or counts, but it would be really helpful if we have to go through a summer like this again to know what our ability is to shut down part of Main Street and increase outside business work. So I don't know how that fits in, but, I mean, I hope that we're not going through this again, but, I mean, who knows? So if we can find any way to help that out through our surveys, I think that would be great also.
Well, I know one of the discussions, one of the alternatives that we'll be talking about at Administrative Committee in the expansion of sidewalk cafes was, there was a wild idea thrown out about shutting down Main Street and making it a pedestrian plaza or promenade. Certainly, that will remove parking, so any number of scenarios could be run through to determine what the impacts would be. But again, the issues of taking traffic off of Main Street is as much a transportation issue as it is a parking issue.
Sure.
So, again, a lot of different scenarios, but we can certainly look at whatever you'd like.
Well,
Well,
I think
let's-
go ahead.
Let's start with Mr. Belknap.
Okay?
Yeah, and I think just even looking through the list of recommendations that were made coming from that group, like as several of us have commented on, most of them didn't happen, but maybe some of them should be revisited with, because many things have changed, but many things have not changed.
I appreciate the fact that most of these don't involve a fee increase,
Yeah.
and so we do have time to breathe, rather than trying to get this all done in 7 days.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right.
Okay, awesome. Shall we adjourn now, or?
I'm good.
All right, awesome. We are adjourned.
Can't
Thank
open or
you.
put away.